Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Investigations, which is episode 20 of season 2 of Star Trek Voyager. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Voyager one episode at a time. In this video I cover the second season episode Investigations. So Investigations is the episode in which Neelix decides to do a morning show program, and in doing so he uncovers that there is something going on. He discovers that Tom Paris is leaving the ship, which he's very sad about, and he broadcasts that and does a tribute to him. But then he discovers that there's a spy on board communicating with the Kazon, which he thinks is Tom Paris, so he makes that announcement. However, Janeway and Tuvok reveal that Paris was not a spy, that he was in fact a part of a sting operation to try to discover who the spy was. And so Neelix goes back out and says, I was wrong about Tom Paris, he wasn't the spy. And then the spy eventually reveals himself. It was Michael Jonas, the guy we've seen every episode communicating with the Kazon. Anyway, Neelix and Jonas get into a scuffle. Neelix kills him. Tom Paris returns from the Kazon ship, and all is well. Alright, so this is obviously the big conclusion of this ongoing storyline with Michael Jonas communicating with the Kazon, and also Tom Paris acting up and misbehaving. And I've gotten into this a lot before about how a lot of the writers hated the storyline. Particularly talked about last week's episode, Life Signs, where writer Kenneth Biller was upset that that storyline interfered with his good standalone episode. And I also talked about how much I very strongly disagree with him and think that he's a whiny writer and kind of ruined the show a bit. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear that, but cats are behind the green screen throwing shit around and then meowing. But anyway, that was a bit distracting. But anyway, so I think the ongoing storyline was actually a good idea. I was actually a huge fan of it when it was happening, when it first aired, way back when, because I like continuity. I like continuous thing, like even before it was like in, you know, the thing to do. That's probably why I picked up on it like very fast. Like as soon as they started doing it, I think the big one that really started like doing it and introducing it to TV shows was 24. And so I watched that show right away because I loved the idea, and then it was lost, and then it became commonplace that pretty much nowadays every single streaming show does it that way. Even a lot of network shows do it that way. I know there's always shows like that, like Babylon 5 or whatever, and apparently some British shows or whatever that, but I don't know. This stuff is, you know, who cares about that stuff? but anyway, so, and also Next Generation had some recurring storylines with like the Traveler and Q and Worst Discommodation and stuff like that. So it's not like Star Trek has never done serialized storytelling before. I talked about this when I covered TNG. People who said TNG was strictly episodic were actually wrong. They snuck in continuity and serialization where they could. In fact, as I said, like the first season I ever watched of TNG was season 4, and almost every episode tied back to an earlier episode, so I didn't really get the references, but I still enjoyed it, and I liked it when I went back and saw the early episodes. It's like, oh, this is where Laura came from. Oh, this is who Dr. Brahms is, and oh, this is who Kalar is. You know, there's nothing wrong with continuity, and I think And this is something we get into with Deep Space Nine when they started doing the full-on continuity in later seasons with the Dominion War, is that the producers apparently behind the scenes were like, oh, you're killing the show! Which, alright, so to be fair, 90s was different. As I mentioned, there wasn't DVD collections, there wasn't serialization. I mean, not serialization, streaming service. There wasn't streaming service, there wasn't DVD, so you couldn't just go back and watch previous episodes whenever you wanted to. So if you missed an episode, then you're shit out of luck and you don't, miss your piece of the continuity. However, they do have the previously on segments, which is the whole point of them, to catch people up who hadn't seen any. And as I'll get to when I covered the Deep Space Nine station takeover arc, I did miss a couple of those episodes when that first aired, but it was all good because I saw the previously on, which gave me the information I need to watch it. So this whole thing about, oh, you're killing the show with serialization, blah, 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 these fuckers were morons. I'm sorry. They were flat out wrong. I would argue that the serialization brought more audiences and increased the incentive to keep watching. But anyway, I do know people gave up on Lost because they were lost. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. But they were lost when watching the episode because they missed a couple and whatever. But I think those people are dumb. I think the majority of audiences, it breeds reviewing. So I think these producers are wrong. As I said, I think all these dumb writers who pushed Michael Piller off the show because they didn't like serialization, they were wrong. I think serialization was a good thing. And as I said, when this episode first aired in the mid-90s, before streaming services and DVD collections made serialization a normal thing. So before that, I loved it. I loved the idea of having the storyline that goes on and on and on, and you hint at it in the background. Now, all that being said, this episode's a disappointment. It does, when I look back at the Michael Jonas storyline as a whole, doesn't work. There are ways they could have handled it. I still like the idea of it, and I still do enjoy that they led up to this point instead of just what later seasons of Voyager would do. They would just suddenly introduce, do the storyline. All of a sudden, Paris wants to leave the ship. It doesn't make any sense why. And all of a sudden, there's this spy, and it's this character that we've never seen before, random engineering guy, and it's who gives a fuck? So, I will say that this episode did land a lot better than it would have if they had just made this a one-off. And that actually pisses me off a lot when Voyager does this in later seasons. And I'll point it out when they do, and they do it a lot, where they'll just introduce this character and say, oh, this random ensign has been around for so long, and we're good friends with the random ensign, and even though we've never fucking seen this person before in the whole 6 years of the show. That pisses me off every time they do that. So I appreciate very much that they didn't do that here. That they actually showed Michael Jonas communicating with the Kazon. They showed Paris gradually becoming, more and more sloppy and being late and being a dick and doing gambling and shit like that. I appreciate that they did this setup. But all that being said, this episode, the conclusion of what it was all leading up to, was kind of it wasn't terrible, but it was a letdown. It didn't live up to the setup, and for that matter, they could have done a better job with the setup. As I mentioned in some of the previous episodes that showed Michael Jonas, it was just him calling the Kazon, being, oh, this is what's happening in this week's episode. You might find it interesting. It's I don't know. To be fair, they did do a couple things, like once the Kazon dude said, hey, I want you to, sabotage the ship's engine, and he's like, no, fuck off. Like, I want to hear from Seska. I'm not doing anything until I hear from Seska. And then next episode, Seska calls him and is like, this is how you can sabotage the engines. He's like, whoa. Do you, I don't know if I want to do that. And she's like, you better fucking do it. We're taking over the ship whether you like it or not. And if you help us, we'll be good to you. Otherwise, you can just suffer with everyone else. But then tries to butter him up. It'll be okay, Mike, or whatever. I actually like that scene. That was in the previous episode, the one that Kenneth Piller was bitching about. Oh, you ruined my perfect episode. Sorry. You just can't understate how much I disagree with him about that. So I like that stuff. That stuff was a good setup. So they might have overdid it with, stuff like Threshold, when you'd be like, oh, let me tell you about this Warp 10 experiment. and shit like that was unnecessary, or they could have handled it better. They could have shown Jonas, being more constructive to, the overall plot or whatever. So, it wasn't handled the best, but I still appreciate it. As I said, I still think it was good. This episode, it was okay. There were some things I did like. It was interesting seeing the storyline come to a head. As I said, it's because they set up to it. If they did not set up to this, I wouldn't give a shit about this storyline. But you're going to conclude this ongoing storyline with Neelix doing a morning show? Seriously, what the fuck? That was not a smart decision. And apparently, the original idea of this episode, which they changed at the last minute when they first started filming, was much, much worse. Originally, the original idea was the entire episode would be from Neelix's perspective and would be about his morning show. You wouldn't even see Tom Paris go off to the Kazon ship. All that shit would happen off screen. And the studio very rightfully, noticed that and said, no, don't do that. That's a bad idea. We need to see the action on screen. In this case, they're actually right. But I would have gone further and say 86, the whole dumbass Neelix doing a morning show storyline altogether. If you want to have an episode about Neelix doing a morning show, do it in a different episode that's not going to destroy this storyline that you've been building up to all season. Having a throwaway bullshit episode that you can ruin that shitty. Make that standalone episode shitty and not ruin the entire storyline you've been setting up for. If I haven't made it clear, I think the whole idea of Neelix doing a morning show is terrible. And I know, in modern times, people will be like, oh, it's like Neelix has his own YouTube channel, or he has his own podcast. But that's a modern way of looking at it. And I suppose if you just saw this episode for the first time in the modern era, you might look at it this way. But I remember saying in the 90s, before YouTube channels and podcasts were a thing, and what I saw it more as almost like a Wayne's World type thing, like those community productions, but more to the point, it's a morning show. It's like Good Morning America or the Today Show or something like that, where they come on and just do all this fluff and be like, oh, this is what I like to eat. Oh, today is the Groundhog Day, or whatever bullshit they do on morning shows. I don't watch them because they're boring and dumb and fluffy, which is exactly what this is. It's all fluff. It's just oh, the doctor's going to perform or talk about, the whatever, and it's bullshit. Okay, so I did a live stream a few years back about Neelix and how he's such a hated character and people really don't like him. And I was pointing out that it depends on how well he's written, because some episodes they use him correctly and he's actually really good. Jatrell is probably the best example of that. But some episodes they really, really misfire and use him incorrectly, and he's just an annoying little shit that you want the hell off your screen. This episode falls into the latter category. He says, "Get the fuck off my screen, you annoying little shit!" That is my reaction to Neelix in this episode. He's not funny. He's not interesting. He comes off as goofy and dumb. And I'm like, seriously, you got this good storyline that, granted, you didn't handle the best. It wasn't perfect, but it's still a good storyline that you're leading up to. You had the building blocks for, and you're going to ruin it with having Neelix acting like an annoying little shit doing his dumbass fluffy morning show. Like, why the fuck would you do that? Like, what the hell is wrong with you? That is such a bad decision. And it's funny because this is what Michael Piller wanted to do. As I said, Michael Piller actually wanted the whole episode to be about it. And, like, come on. Like, I always defend Michael Piller, and as I keep talking about, like, they never should have fired him. And I stand by that, and I stand by he's a good writer. But he's always not perfect. He's not perfect. And sometimes he can mess up. And this was a big time screw up. Or bad decision. And not doing the storyline, the serialized storyline altogether, that's actually smart. That was a good decision. But the way you decided to conclude it was not. And Jerry Taylor, apparently, she said she had a quote of saying something along the lines of, "I'm just glad to finally get this storyline done and over with. I don't like it. I thought it was dumb, and I didn't think it worked. And I'm just glad we finally got it done and moved on." And so that does lead me to conclude that she was part of the team that pushed Pillar out. But also leads me to conclude that's kind of maybe... Actually, when I read that quote, I was like, oh, that makes sense. This is kind of why the episode sucks. Because she didn't put any effort into it. She didn't give a shit about it. She just wanted it over and done with. And that's why they didn't conclude it in a good way that would have made the storyline way much better. Just like, oh, get it over with. Now, all that being said, I did find... As I said, like, I didn't think this episode was terrible. I did find it interesting, and it was mainly because it was built up to. I think the stuff with Paris leaving the ship and getting abducted by Seska was exciting and interesting. I think the hunt for who is the spy was interesting. As much as I hate Neelix in this episode, I did find his investigation of trying to figure out who found the spy somewhat interesting. Although I do think it would have been much better if it was Tuvok who was looking for the spy and they weren't doing it in the context of this dumbass morning show. And here's my question. Like, Tuvok and Janeway, like, told Neelix to drop his search. They said, just don't look into this, we'll handle it. Oh, yeah, he went to Tuvok and said, I think there's a spy, and Tuvok is like, thanks for the information, now don't do anything else, this is my job. And Neelix kind of ignores him because of the advice Harry Kim gave him earlier in the episode, and does it anyway. So Neelix goes to engineering, and he asks Torres for help, and she's like, I'm busy right now, and Hogan, why don't you help him? So Hogan goes over and help him. I got a question. If Tuvok ordered Neelix not to investigate, why is the engineering team, who are Starfleet officers, whose Tuvok is their superior, why are they helping Neelix, who is not a Starfleet officer, who is just a chef who does a TV show? Why are they allowing him access to these consoles and sensitive information? Like, let's assume for the second that they're not aware that Tuvok had ordered Neelix not investigate this, which, why would they not be aware of it? Because he's the fucking security chief. You think that he would let at least the senior officers and other relevant people know that Neelix is not to have access to this kind of sensitive information. But let's assume for the second Tuvok sucks at his job, which I won't assume because I think it's more bad writing, but let's assume that Tuvok didn't let these fucking B'Elanna Torres, the chief engineer, know not to trust Neelix. Even if that's the case, why would they give access to a civilian? Why would they give civilians sensitive access to their Starfleet records and material? And like, this is just sloppy, like, security all along. The whole episode makes Tuvok come off as like a totally incompetent moron who's shit as his job. And to be fair, that's going to happen a lot going forward in later seasons as well. Like, they totally ruined Tuvok's character. But this was out of character for the show to do it this early in the show. In earlier seasons when the show was actually good. So it's out of character for the show to be this bad earlier in the season, or earlier in the show, I mean. But you know how I feel about later seasons. So that's frustrating. So it would have made more sense to me, and it would have been more exciting and less goofy and dumb if we were following Tuvok running this investigation, and if they actually made it a bit more sort of interesting or harder for him to discover who the spy was. And also, the thing with Tom, so I heard this suggestion that they could have gone several more episodes with Tom Paris being on the Kazon ship. They could have actually, maybe he actually pretended to join up with them to an extent, and they could have kept the storyline going. I think that actually would have been a better idea. And instead of resolving this storyline with Neelix doing a fucking morning show, they could have waited to the season finale and resolved it then, and it actually ending with the Kazon taking over the ship, which is what happens in the finale. Because if you notice, but I actually do like the fact that this episode is what sets up the finale. It sets up basics, because in this episode, Seska and the Kazon are trying to take Voyager. And so it sets up the idea of that's what Seska is trying to do. And so they fail this time, but then they reconfigure and they find another way to do it, and they do it again later at the end of the season. So it's kind of setting you up, which is another reason why I like this episode. It sets you up for the idea of what will happen. It lets you know that is Seska's goal, to try to take over the ship, and even though she's unsuccessful in this episode, she will be successful in the finale. But that being said, like, the way they do it in the finale, by having her use Chakotay's baby to try to lure them into the trap, which I think Voyager were dumb for falling for that trap. So I thought it would have been better if they actually went with it in this episode. So make the so they should have made the this episode the finale. They should have actually dragged out the storyline even more. Maybe don't show it every single episode. Don't have Michael Jonas call every single week going, this is the plot of this week's episode. Maybe let it go for a couple episodes, but go back to like Tom Paris on the Kazon ship or something. Like make it worthwhile, and then tie it into that's the reason why the Kazon actually take over the ship. Instead of using Chakotay's baby as lure, as bait. Like I think it was dumb that Voyager fell for that. And also and again, this is getting into basics, but how the Kazon kept firing at the same spot, and they didn't realize that would disable the self-destruct. I mean, how can you be so dumb? How can you not know this? Like that portrays B'Elanna and Harry Kim as morons. Like they should know this shit. But anyway, that's a complaint about basics. So I think it would have been better all around for the entire season, for this episode and the final episode, that they not do this Neelix morning show bullshit, or at least if they did do it, they just not tied into the Michael Jonas storyline, because that is a really unsatisfying way to conclude a storyline you've been setting up for, and instead leave it for the finale and tie it into the Kazon actually taking over the ship. In this case, I believe if they had done it this way, a lot of people would have liked this storyline a lot better and looked back at this storyline a lot more fondly. Now, the other thing is that there's a good argument to be made that maybe they shouldn't have shown Michael Jonas was the spy. Because that's actually the first thing they did. It was the episode Alliances is the first time we see Michael Jonas and Hogan. And in that same episode, we see him communicating with the Kazon. So this is kind of the opposite of what they did with Seska. And I talked about this in Season 1, the Seska reveal, and how amazing it is. And I lots of praise on the show. Jerry Taylor in particular, who was her idea, and she was very on board with this, which makes me wonder why she wasn't on board with this one. But the way they revealed Seska instead, because they had the idea of introducing a character who was a crew on Chakotay's ship, who was half Cardassian, or not half, she's full Cardassian, but she was pretending to be Bajoran. She was undercover Cardassian. And they had this idea, like, at the start of the show. Apparently, it was one of the very first scripts written for the show. But they realized it would be smarter to push that script off and slowly introduce the character of Seska and show her in the background and have her become more and more of a prominent character. And then the big reveal happens. So by the time the reveal happens, you already know who this character is. It wasn't someone who just popped up out of nowhere. And they should have done the same thing with Jonas. Like, they introduced Jonas and Hogan in Alliances, but then wait an episode to say, oh, Tuvok suspects someone's communicating with the Kazon, and then you see them concoct this plan with Tom Paris to, be miscontent or whatever. And then, so you follow that, and you follow Tuvok. Maybe once in a while, Tuvok, in a random episode, Tuvok would be like, oh, I detected another communication, so they're at it again. I still can't figure out who it is. And also, while you're doing this simultaneously, keep showing Hogan and, what's his face? Michael Jonas. Keep showing them in engineering. Have them have some lines. Have them be a bit prominent. And so, when we finally get to the finale, not this stupid Neelix morning show, but you finally get to the big reveal, you have Hogan and Michael Jonas be very prominent, and then say Tuvok narrows it down to someone who's in engineering, and so the audience thinks, oh, it could be B'Elanna, or it could be Hogan, or it could be Michael Jonas, or some random, extra. Now, the audience will be able to figure out that it's not going to be B'Elanna. It's not going to be our main character. It's not going to be some dumb extra. It's going to be Michael Jonas or Hogan. And so you don't know which one it is, and maybe they could even throw in a red herring to make you think like it's Hogan. But then at the end, you reveal it's actually Michael Jonas. I think that way. Now, granted, that way is very similar to what they did with Seska. They did this similar thing with Seska and with Lieutenant Carey. But so some people might have said, you're just doing the same thing over again. And okay, I kind of get that criticism. But on the other hand, I still think it would have been better. I still think it would have been better. Because we don't need scenes with Michael Jonas explaining the plot of the episode to the Kazon. Like, we don't need that. So it would have been better off if it was following Tuvok and his investigation. And the other thing about this version, is that you would know early on that Tom Paris is doing an act. Like, he's putting on an act, and he's not really wanting to leave the ship, which I know some people might think is a bad thing, but I'd actually say is a good thing, because I didn't buy his behavior of being all late and sloppy and his hair being all messed up and doing the gambling thing or whatever and like shoving Chakotay. And it's interesting to go watch like reviews of people who had never seen the show and are watching those scenes for the first time and being like, oh, I don't buy this for Tom Paris. So he's totally out of character. Why he's acting like this? Like, I don't buy this. He wouldn't do that. And that's illustrates the problem with that storyline, is that they did it in a way that was unrealistic and you didn't buy. So by the time we get to this episode, you find out he's putting on an act. You're like, of course. Like, of course he's putting on an act, because that was totally out of character for him. Now, so two ways you could fix this. One way is actually selling it more and giving us a better reason to why he's being miscontent and actually fooling the audience to thinking he would leave the ship, which is not what they did. Or fit it into my previous idea, you could just show him show that it's a plan from the beginning. Therefore, when he starts acting up like this, we the audience know that he's putting on an act, and you're like, oh, okay. And then it makes sense. So, I really think that it would have been better had they done it that way. And also tied it into the finale. I think the idea was good. They had something there. They just didn't fully realize it and fully execute it the correct way. And I dare say, judging by Jerry Taylor's response and all the other writers who were whining, the reason why they did it is because the writing staff was not putting in the proper effort to do it and just wanted to get the storyline over with. Which, screw them for that, because it actually would have made the show much better. I don't know. But anyway, it's one of the reasons why the Voyager writers aren't as good as the Deep Space Nine writers, and why Voyager is not as good as Deep Space Nine. Because Deep Space Nine embraced continuity and serialization. But anyway, regardless. I mean, a lot of people in interviews and the documentary and all this stuff, people attached to Deep Space Nine will always be like, oh, well, our show kind of breeds serialization and continuity because people are on the same place. They're just not traveling week to week to different planets or whatever. They're there and they're at the same place. But I would argue Voyager, the concept of Voyager, demands continuity or serialization just as much as Deep Space Nine, because even though they're on a spaceship that's moving from place to place, they're alone in the Delta Quadrant, which means everyone on the ship is stuck there. But we can't have people transfer to other ships. We can't have like them go to a starbase or go to vacation or whatever. That everyone is stuck in that tiny ship with just 150 people. So a small community that demands continuity and serialization, which they did do in the first two seasons, but then promptly abandoned it in later seasons, which is why the show got worse. But although they didn't do it enough in the first two seasons, they could have went more hard on it. But no, the fucking studio, I don't want to do continuity. But anyway, sorry, I think I hit on that point enough. The other thing I was going to say, the part about Chakotay not being notified about this, what they were doing, because they wanted to sell it more. Like, if I were Chakotay, I would be a lot more upset about this than he was. Like, he's the fucking first officer. Why is Tuvok aware of this plan and he is not? And don't give me, oh, we wanted it to seem authentic when Tom Paris was being a dick to you. Like, I don't know. I think that's a really shitty thing for Janeway to do. I think if I was Chakotay, I would be like, this is a real sort of, especially because of the fact that Chakotay was a Maquis and they integrated him into the ship as the first officer. This is really a big hit to Chakotay and Janeway's relationship, to their professional relationship, to the captain first officer relationship. Like, if I were Chakotay, I would be like, I don't know if I can trust you anymore. Like, I could be, thinking that something's going on, but you're going to Tuvok and conspiring behind my back. Like, in that one scene, it seemed like Chakotay got, when they revealed this to him, that he got over it, like, way too quickly. And it was like, almost immediately, he was like, oh, yes, well, what's next in the plan? Where I think he should have blown up at Janeway. I think he should have been like, they did have, like, one line. He was like, what? Why wasn't I told, or whatever? But that's not good enough. He should have had a much bigger reaction to this. And so I kind of think it was shitty that they just didn't tell him and did this whole, like, sting operation behind his back. Like, I'm sure they could have sold it without Tom Paris being a complete dick to Chakotay. Or, Chakotay could have been in on it. Like, he could have sold it as well. Just maybe not focused so much on Paris being a dick. Like, why is it they think Paris is good enough to go undercover and pretend, but not Chakotay? Chakotay apparently is a terrible actor and would be unable to sell the fact that he's pissed off with Tom Paris, which wouldn't be hard for him to sell because he already doesn't like Tom Paris. So this whole concept of, we want an authentic performance is not good enough to leave your first officer out of a very important integral plan. Like, if I were Chakotay, I would be like really upset, like, to the point of wanting to mutiny or like be like, we can't, this whole experiment of the Maquis joining this crew is not going to work because they don't really trust us. Like, I think it's a major breach of trust. But that is just me. The other thing is with the Doctor, I think this is probably the first episode that really begins his character storyline that will go all the way up to the end of the show, that will in fact grow worse and worse and worse. But I think this is where it starts. The idea of him being really egotistical and wanting to show off to people and wanting, like in this episode, he's wanting to be on the program. At first, Neelix has to sell him on it, but then he's like desperately wanting to do it and wanting to talk about, this time, the Vulcan and the, something, immunity system, friend or foe, or whatever shit he says, the medical shit that sounds boring as hell that no one's really interested in. And he keeps bringing it up and like, I want to do this. Why won't you have me on your morning show? I'm going to be popular and whatever. And so this will get worse and worse, especially in the later seasons when he wants to be an opera singer, and his ego becomes so overinflated. I think they do kind of ruin the character in later seasons because of that. And he wasn't really acting like that until this episode. I think this is the first episode we really see him be an attention-grabbing whore who has a big ego. And I don't particularly like that storyline. So the fact that it began here, I see it as a bad thing. Other important thing about this episode, the King of Jordan, who at the time was the Crown Prince of Jordan, has a cameo. And I remember online seeing pictures of him and finding out, decades after I saw this episode, that this is the Crown Prince of Jordan, or King of Jordan now, on Voyager. So I saw pictures of him in the Starfleet uniform, and I knew he was on Voyager, but I had no idea what episode it was from. I thought it was just some random guy in the background. But when I was watching this episode, as soon as I saw him on screen, I'm like, that's him. That's the King of Jordan, and he was just an extra who apparently he wasn't allowed to have any lines because he wasn't part of the guild. And so they had he was talking to Harry Kim in the corridor, just random guy, which I think he did kind of stand out. He didn't look like your typical extra, and I guess that makes sense if he's like royalty. But yeah, that. And apparently he threw like this big party for the for the cast afterwards. But I don't know, this is random. But apparently he was a big Star Trek fan and wanted to be on the show, and he talked about how difficult acting was, and he's glad that he'd rather be a soldier than an actor. And I'm like, okay. Alright. Whatever. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else about this episode, like Neelix. No, we don't really learn anything about him. As I said, it's just a very bad use of him. And that fight at the end was like, like it would have been so much better if it was Tuvok. It just seems so goofy how, yeah, the whole thing, like the whole conclusion of this whole storyline just happened too fast. This is part of the reason why I think they should have stretched it out more and had to go towards the finale, because that would be a great conclusion if they concluded with the Kazon taking over Voyager. Like, you would not be expecting that. It would have been so well earned. I dare say it would have been better. But the way they did it here, with having like a goofy fight with Neelix attacking Jonas and them struggling engineering, and Neelix throws him into the warp core, I'm like, really? Neelix kills someone. Neelix finds the spy and kills him. Like, seriously, WTF to the nth degree. Like, they could have had Tuvok kill him and discover who he was and throw him in the warp core, but then it doesn't matter. It's still too late to Kazon take over the ship anyway. That would have been so much better. Like, I can't understate just how much better that would have been. But anyway, kind of beating a dead horse now. So, I would now like to thank everyone on Patreon who supports the channel. It's very much appreciated. This helped me continue with the channel. I'd like to give a big special thanks to Jordan Johnson and Brandon Neilhouse. Thank you so much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Antarius, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Manny Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Miguelcio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we do have a few patron comments on this episode. First comment is from Antarius, who says, the whole plan to find the spy was very risky and could have gone wrong very easily. How could they expect that the Kazon would be so stupid to hold Paris in a room with a working computer console? And why were the Talaxians so stupid to accept Paris on their ship when that meant facing a certain Kazon attack? But not only the aliens are stupid, there seems to be no precautionary measures on Voyager to prevent someone from using an overhead authorization code. Imagine what someone could do to the ship using Janeway's command codes. I like that Neelix has the opportunity to be a hero. This is one of his strongest episodes, but his interest in investigative journalism came out of nowhere. Ridiculous is the resolution of his program. Obviously, the Federation is only able to produce low SD cameras. Nevertheless, I like this episode. My rating is an 8 out of 10. Yeah, we're going to agree to disagree on this being one of Neelix's strongest episodes. But you were making a lot of the same points I was thinking of. Is, yeah, Neelix being able to use Hogan's command code to go and break into Tom Paris's quarters and investigate his logs. That's, yeah, that was a bit of plot contrivance there. That doesn't make sense that their security would suck that badly. That's all Neelix would need to do. Oh yeah, and the whole thing with holding Tom Paris in a room with a working computer console, that was terrible. But here's the thing: they already did this in Star Trek, and worse, in my opinion, in the episode Unification, where Sela was holding Picard, Data, and Spock in this room. They gave them access to a computer console that they could use to create holograms to fool them. Like, oh god, that was worse, I think. Not to say that this justifies this what they did in this episode, but still, I feel like once I've seen a worse version on Star Trek, when I see it again, I'm like, yeah, that tracks. But anyway, next comment is from Kyrie091, who says, investigations? More in Seska, yay! Sorry, more in Seska, yay, son. Yeah, I don't know if that tracks. But anyway, Mark, I tire of this. Seska loves only me. We have something special. She lets me touch her spoon thing. I think that's TMI. Kyrie. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, Investigations is an episode that wraps up the rogue Tom Paris / Mike Jonas as turncoat arc. I wish I could say it does it well, as it seems put together to wrap this up in a way that is forced, which we know for a fact it was. Neelix's forum, that at the time mimics high school videos for the morning, but also could also be compared to YouTube, is a bit interesting. Granted, also a bit cheesy. Jonas seems more evil than complex in his role, and the plan / hope that the Kazon would find Paris and he'd find out what is going on worked like a needle in the haystack. Given all that, the continuation of Paris and Neelix's friendship extended from earlier this season was good, and is where true continuity matters. And Hackett does fine as Seska as always, but I have to admit, seems too much of a mess. Hopes on too many coincidences, etc. But hey, maybe Neelix has proven not to be the most effective journalist, but maybe a more effective detective. I'm sure, much to Tuvok's dismay. I'll give it 6.5 Jonases thrown into the abyss. Yeah, I do agree with you about Neelix and Paris's friendship. That I do like that they carried this on from earlier in the season. But as for Jonas being evil, I don't know. I don't think they handled it the best, but I do get like what they were going for. To me, he didn't come off as evil, and this episode particularly came off as incompetent. The way he was reacting to Neelix, like he didn't even handle him and let Neelix like attack him at the end. He's like, "Come on, Neelix, leave me alone." When Neelix was like clearly seeing that he was trying to sabotage the ship, so he came off as incompetent and goofy in this episode. But previous episodes, like I get his motivation. Like, I think they make this clear in the episode Alliances when they first introduce him, because they show him in the background when they were trying to make an alliance with Seska, and it seems like he's like really wanted to do that. And what you have to remember, like forgetting about the whole Cardassian thing, the main reason why Seska left the ship is because she didn't like doing things the Starfleet way. And Michael Jonas is the Maquis. He doesn't like doing things the Starfleet way either. And Seska's main point is that they shouldn't be trying to uphold Starfleet morality, that they should try anything possible to try to get home, which is actually what the Equinox ends up doing, even though they were Starfleet officers. So it makes sense that there would be a Maquis who would feel the same way, who would be like, I don't like what Janeway's doing, and Chakotay sold us out by going along with it. And so he sees Seska, someone who he knows and apparently was friends with, having the right idea. Now, at first, of course, he was against her because she's Cardassian, which is a Cardassian spy, no less. But I think he got over this by the time we get to the second season, because, especially in the episode Alliances, where he sees Janeway has an avenue to make alliances, to strengthen them, and fucks it up. And so it kind of makes sense that he's like, well, fuck these guys. I want to go on Team Seska. I want to go to the Team Kazon, because it seems like they got the better idea of not letting Starfleet morals interfere with trying to get home at all costs. And it seems like Seska is like building up this, manipulating the Kazon and to get, the means to the end. And so I get that he'd be like, well, I'm sick of this Starfleet bullshit. I want to do what Seska is doing, because it seems like she has the right idea. So I buy that. I think that was his thinking, and I think if you look at the earlier episodes where he first appeared, I think you get that, and I think it makes sense. And also it showed, as I said in the previous episode, I like seeing his trepidation when Seska was asking him to sabotage Voyager, because he didn't want to kill anyone. He just wanted to be, he wanted to be Team Kazon, though. And I buy, though, that Seska sold him on, we're taking the ship regardless, and if you want to not die, if you want to stay on the ship, you should help us. And I think it makes sense that he would go along with it. So I buy his motivation. I don't buy how incompetent he was in this episode. But that is just me. Next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, "This episode is great, but the person who played Mike Jonas is bloody terrible actor. The person who hired him should have been asked for the worst recurring character of any Star Trek show. Even James Darien was better. That this pill of bollocksing, he should have watched how real traders act. Maybe that's why he wanted to talk to Seska so badly, as he wanted her to teach him how to act to be a good trader." So my rating is 9. Great continuity. It's a shame everybody on Voyager forgets what that word means out of 10. Totally agree with you there. Yeah, I like how you refer to Voyager as Star Trek, I don't care about continuity, Voyager. But in the earlier seasons, yes, great continuity. Obviously not as positive on this episode as you are. And, I don't think the guy who played Michael Jonas was that bad. I do get, I think it didn't fit with the way his acting didn't fit, but I think that was bad writing, to be honest, and I think that's why the acting comes off as inauthentic and goofy. I think it's because the script wasn't written well in this episode. I think his acting was fine in his previous appearances, and I do feel like I've seen this actor other places, and I looked up what other shows and what other movies this actor's been in, and he's been on some shows that I've seen, like L.A. Law, and I think it was not Lost, but some other stuff I've seen, but I'm not that familiar with. So I'm sure I've seen it in the background. But the one thing I did recognize him from was Better Call Saul, and the episode that had a flashback of Jimmy as a kid, and it showed Jimmy and Chuck's father, who apparently is too nice and too naive, and obviously he was taken advantage of. He played him. He played Jimmy McGill's father, and just in that one scene, though. I was like, oh, yeah, maybe I've seen him in that. Although I do believe when I first saw this episode in the 90s, I recognized him, but maybe not. I don't know. Hard to remember. Stephen Kennedy always says, P.S. What is up with his smile? Did he audition to play the Joker? The studio wants someone to play the Joker, not a joke of an actor. Yeah, he did have kind of a goofy smile, but I think that worked for the role. I just didn't mind him as much as you did. Anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, a pretty good episode, I must say. It's pretty suspenseful, and the Jonas/Tom Paris acting rebellious finally comes to a head. We see the conclusion, which, to be fair, isn't perfect. Like, we never got the reason why Jonas was collaborating with Seska and the Kazon, but it was action-packed, suspenseful, and I just wish it had Jonas explain himself. And Neelix, Good Morning America wasn't the best, but it was decent. So yeah, damn good episode, so my rating is an 8 out of 10. Well, I just went into the explanation of why Jonas was doing what he was doing, and I think it was explained in the episode. It's just subtle, but I think it tracks. But as far as Neelix's Good Morning America being decent, no, it wasn't. It was dumb. Sorry. And other people are saying it was kind of like a home video kind of thing. But I saw it more as like a Good Morning America thing, because he even said it's a morning show. He said, good morning. So he's doing a morning show, like flat out. And I think the morning shows like Good Morning America and Today are just as bad as this. And I do like how Harry Kim described it. He was like, it's dessert. It's too much dessert. It's just frosting. That's what he called it, frosting. It's too much frosting. And that's exactly what I think of these morning shows. That's why I hate them. They're so goofy, too. Like, oh, are you this morning? Like the jokes. It's not funny. It's not interesting. The news they say is not interesting. They just talk about casual bullshit. I don't know how anyone can watch those things. Anyway, I don't even know if they're still around. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, oh, crap. It's a mainly Neelix episode, which usually brings it down for me. Anyway, a briefing with Neelix. Bah! Neelix's this mood makes me want to play or watch Shiny Happy People and smash the record/CD or whatever device it happens to be playing on at the time. Tom Paris leaves Voyager and joins the Talaxian ship, then gets abducted by Seska and the Kazon. I know the Kazon are nearly as stupid as the Packlets, but there's absolutely no excuse for Seska to leave Tom alone and unrestrained near a computer. I have to wonder how Tom can operate a computer belonging to a different species in a different quadrant of the galaxy, or have the Kazon acquired Federation technology again. Who gives a rat's arse? Mark, can you tell me why Jonas was spying for Seska and the Kazon? What was Jonas supposed to get out of it apart from getting thrown into a ruptured plasma conduit? I feel slightly sorry for Chakotay for not being in on the plan, but glad that a briefing with Neelix will never be mentioned again. Neelix would win the most tedious award for the Delta Quadrant, and the Doctor would win the same award for the Alpha Quadrant. 3 incognito appearances by then Crown Prince of Jordan out of 10. So I already explained the whole thing with Jonas in detail just a few minutes ago, so I already answered that question, so no need to go into it again. I think, personally, I think it was explained, his motivation. I think it makes sense to me that he's just sick of Starfleet bullshit. He's sick of Janeway's Starfleet morality and wants to fucking get home any means possible. So, and I think that makes sense for a Maquis. Honestly, I think it tracks. But anyway, as far you feel slightly sorry for Chakotay for not being in on the plane. I feel very sorry for him, and I think it was unrealistic how fast he got over that. I think Janeway massively betrayed him with that move. I think it really showed that she didn't trust him at all, and I think that he should have mutinied him. Maybe that's me. Maybe I'm making a big deal out of nothing. And as far as the Kazon being as stupid as the Packlets, to be fair, Sela and the Romulans were more stupid. But not that justifies this, but still. Anyway, yeah. I think that's pretty much all I had to say about that. Oh, no, I was going to mention the Talaxian ship. Because the one thing, another way that Janeway is being kind of a dick in this episode is that she put Tom Paris on the Talaxian ship knowing that the Kazon would attack. Now, I don't think the Talaxians would necessarily know that Kazon's attack. Like, I don't think they would consider that. Maybe, I don't know. But Janeway for sure. In fact, that was part of the whole point. Was she knew that's the whole reason why Tom Paris went to the Talaxian ship, because she knew the Kazon would abduct him. How did she know that the Kazon wouldn't just kill all the Talaxians? Like, they could have. They very well could have. Like, she put them in major jeopardy, in danger. Like, if I were Talaxians, I'd be very fucking pissed off. Like, again, this is her being a really, like, shitty person. Like, this whole thing, like, treating her first officer like shit, and then, like, putting these Talaxians in direct jeopardy. Like, they're lucky they didn't all get killed because of her. Like, what the fuck? Like, how would she react if they all got killed? She'd go, oh, well, like, what? Seriously, like, better them than us? Like, what kind of fucking Starfleet captain is that? But anyway. Thank you so much, patrons, for your comments. So, my rating for Investigations out of 10 is going to be a 7. Very good. I give it a lot of credit for being a continuous storyline. As I said, I think this episode would be a billion times worse if they just, Michael Jonas and this Tom Paris thing just popped up out of nowhere for this episode. I love that they actually set up for it, and that they, even if that setup wasn't perfect, even if they could have done it better if they'd done it differently, I still very much appreciate it, and I think it was suspenseful in that regard. I do like the hunt of, the deception of Tom Paris, and finally seeing that come to fruition, and seeing Neelix, like, investigate and discover who Jonas is. Like, all that was suspenseful and all well and good. But the whole Neelix briefing with Neelix was fucking annoying, and Neelix was totally a get the fuck off my screen character in this episode. I could not stand it. I thought it was so goofy and dumb. I hate morning shows. I think this was a dumb idea. Oh yeah, another thing Brandon mentioned was, thank God that we'll never hear of this morning show again. That's what I thought, but I looked it up on Memory Alpha, and it was implying that they mentioned this again. I'm like, what? I never remember seeing this again. So they didn't show it, but apparently it was the episode Macrocosm. They mentioned it. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot all about it, because when Neelix and Janeway went back to the ship and everyone was, taken over by the giant germs or whatever, they went into Samantha Wildman's quarters, and apparently that briefing was Neelix was still playing in the background. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot about that. But thank God they didn't show it any more than that. That's kind of inconsequential, just a little. But they're implying that he's been doing that for like a year. And I always thought it was funny too that Neelix was talking about how he wants to be a journalist and do this, and yet, like, nothing ever comes of it. Like, apparently, I guess he was doing it off screen for a year, but whatever. It doesn't seem to be like a major part of his character. It's so out of character for him to be like this journalist. Like, he's not a journalist. Like, this is just such a bad use of Neelix, and such a dumb one. Like, they had a good storyline here, and they could have resolved it so much better. I still very strongly believe that should have tied it into the finale. I think it would have been a 10 out of 10 if they did that. But, yeah, it is what it is. And so I still appreciate it for what it is. I still appreciate the continuity. I always appreciate continuity. But, yeah, the Neelix thing does sour it a lot. Anyway, so that is it for my review of Investigations. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you thought of the video, and yeah, hit that subscribe button for more stuff. And if you really want to support the channel, you could do so by supporting me on Patreon. There's different rewards for different tiers, such as making these comments that I'll read in my videos, having access to a patron-only series of videos I do exclusively for my patron supporters, where I revisit reviews I've already made, and yeah, pre-releases, other stuff you can check out if you are so inclined to do so. But even if you're not, you could check out my Facebook page or my Blue Sky page, and you could leave a shorter comment on an episode that I'll read in my videos. Links for those are in the description below. Alright, so let's see what's coming on up on my channel. This Thursday I'll be revisiting my review on Patreon, exclusive for Patreon supporters. I'll be revisiting my review for Deadlock, one of my favorite episodes of the show. And then on Saturday, back on my main channel, back to Deep Space Nine with my review of Rules of Engagement. And then on Monday, another channel on my main channel, but back to Voyager with my review of Innocence. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Deep Space Nine and many other shows and Star Trek videos as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.